A while ago now, I think maybe about a year ago or so, the movie or documentary Unrest was released on YouTube. I had watched it years ago on Netflix, but then watched it again recently as with my seizure brain I had forgotten much of it. I'm so glad that they released it for free for people because it is raising awareness for ME/CFS that people just don't understand anything about, including me really. I hadn't heard much about what was going on with that particular condition. Watching it again this time, there are some things that have stuck with me more so than the last time. I can relate to so much of what Jennifer Brea has experienced and is experiencing now still, I'm sure. I have chronic fatigue, but not specifically ME/CFS. At one point, a few years ago, I actually, probably after I watched the documentary the first time, I joined an ME/CFS group because I thought, well, I've got chronic fatigue too, so we've probably got a lot in common that we could discuss. However, I was basically chased out of the group because I have MS fatigue, and that's not the same thing. We have a lot of overlap, but their specific situation is very unique and much smaller, and very little is known about it. So I wasn't welcome because I had a diagnosis, and that was frustrating for me. I get why they did it. They're in a very unique situation, but at the same time, it's hard for me to find people to talk about because even people with MS don't always have chronic fatigue, and those that do, it can be different from one patient to the next. So that was kind of sad for me, but I did understand why they couldn't really connect with me. One thing I did notice in that video is that they talk about how all these other conditions get a lot more attention in Western medicine, and ME/CFS is really unknown and it doesn't get very much attention, and there's very little research going on. However, what I think a lot of people don't understand is that even though they have done a lot more research and a lot more working on details and, well, funding for drugs, honestly, that's what it is, to deal with MS, they have not found the cause. They're not looking for the cause. They're not looking for a cure. They're looking for ways to make money. They're looking for ways to wreck your immune system so that the MS symptoms will settle down at least for a time. There is no study showing that it actually helps MS patients to take these immunosuppressant drugs or biologics for the long term. In the end, once you go progressive, and that's it. And it's going to happen the way that it happens. And what you took to try and keep it to a minimum before that does not have any direct effect that they could find on how things will be for you later in life. So I understand lots of people use the biologics or immunosuppressants and they're feeling good on them, and that's great. I have no judgment. My situation is very complicated, and I have been injured so badly by the medical system, by medicines and surgeons for that matter, so many times that I just don't trust it, and I'm willing to look into it, but ultimately I have not found any convincing argument to have me take any of those drugs at this point. And I've had MS for much of my life now. I was diagnosed back in 2011, if you remember from my earlier videos, and have not taken an immunosuppressant. And my first MS neurologist, who spent his entire career treating MS patients specifically, actually suggested I should not take a biologic because he found that in the long term they caused many side effects and didn't actually really help the patients in the end. And so he didn't see why they were worth it for most people, and particularly in my case. So I still agree with him on that. I've had many other MS neurologists since then disagree with him because it's all opinion in the end, but I still appreciate what he had to say about it. So back to the movie. There are some scenes that really struck me that I wanted to talk a little bit more about. The scenes where you can see that Jennifer has overdone it and has paid the price once she got home because her body was so massively overstimulated by very simple things. And that's what happens to me. Even an enjoyable couple of hours out will knock me flat the next day. And if it's a longer term thing, like a day trip somewhere, even if it's a really fun, enjoyable day trip, which I don't get to really do anymore, but on those rare occasions when they happen, I will be down and out for a good week or two. So I don't have the immediate kind of reaction that she has where she has to be put on the floor or the ground and she's lying there and she's crying and she can't even speak coherently because she's in so much pain. That doesn't happen to me, but I do have sort of a longer, slower process of being just kind of knocked out and not able to do anything. I don't tend to lie in bed. I will sit on the couch more often, but I will lay on bed more often as well because I just don't have the energy to get up. So my situation is a bit different, like I said, but I can understand because even enjoyable situations, like in the case of the movie, she was at kind of a rally for a university that I don't know if she went to or her husband went to, but anyway, they were celebrating and having a really fun time. And it was loud and noisy. And as soon as I could tell that, I thought, oh man, that's going to hurt her. That would hurt me. That would be so painful for me to have to hear all that noise. But at the same time, it was a really fun event. She had a great time, but by the time she got home, she was a wreck. And she had to be picked up and put right down on the ground just to try to get through it because it was so bad. So, yeah, I can relate to that. That whole kind of situation is something that I have a hard time learning how to describe to people in my life because if you haven't been through it, you really can't relate to it. And if you're not living with someone who's going through it, you don't see what the day-to-day looks like. So I thought I might share a little bit about what my average day looks like, not just the ones that are after a major event, but every day. Because my world is so very, very different than anyone else's that I know, honestly. So it's a tough thing to explain to people. My husband sees what's going on with me because he's here day to day. And in fact, sometimes he's the one who tells me you need to not do that because he knows what's going to happen. And sometimes he's even maybe a little bit overprotective of that, but I get that. Because just like with Jennifer or the other people that she interviewed in the movie, if I'm having a good day, I'm excited to get to do as much as possible while I can. But there's a fine line that I have to be so careful not to cross. And that tends to lead to frustration for me because I just want to function like a normal person and get things done, even just a little bit. Another thing that really jumped out at me is when her husband Omar was talking about how their life is just normal to them because of how it's been for so long. And it's only when seeing it through someone else's eyes that they're reminded of how not normal it is.
There are moments where I see us through other people's eyes, and somehow that's much sadder than when I'm just kind of living our life together. This is normal for us.
It's so normal.
And it's only when other people observe how not normal it is that I'm forced to recalibrate and sit with how hard this is. You know what it is about being observed? It's that people feel sorry for me. And I don't know why that.
Baby, I'm so sorry.
It's a nerve.
I thought it might be helpful to share what my average day looks like. When people ask how I am or what I've been doing, I don't have fun vacation stories or a busy time at work or anything of substance to share usually. Even fine or okay is very different for me than for a healthy person. Thinking about how I function each day is different too. Do I have the energy to shave my legs today? Wash my hair? Is it worth it to push through anyway? I've also battled insomnia for many years, so just trying to get enough sleep to get through the day brings its own pile of challenges. So I'm not quick to get up in the morning because I'm trying to get enough sleep to get through. I have to rest and try to sleep in the afternoon, so I avoid appointments for that time of day, and of course I can't be involved in any day-long or even afternoon social events at all. Basically, mid to late morning is my day. That's when I try to get my never-ending doctor's appointment scheduled. And on days when I don't have those appointments, I will try and get out with a friend or have a chat on the phone or make a quick video. if it's quiet in the house, which it usually isn't. I try to avoid taking pharma drugs whenever possible because, in my system, they tend to be very damaging. But I do have to take some, so I set alarms to remind myself to take them each day. I also take a lot of supplements, so I have alarms set to remind me when to take some of those too. So my schedule for the day pretty much revolves around alarms going off to take pills. Life every day means that I have a lot of fatigue, which means I'm not going to get much done. I might be able to do some food preparation on a good day, and that's vital for me since I eat such a specialized diet. Everything is made from scratch every day. For the rest of the day, I often have to remind myself that it's okay to sit down and rest. It's necessary if I don't want to really mess up my system for the rest of the day and probably the next few following days. If you're healthy, the normal thing to do in those cases would be to push through and tell yourself not to be lazy. That's what I did for years, and it always made me worse. But in those days, I was not diagnosed, so I didn't know that the constant fatigue I felt was not normal. I really just thought I was lazier than most people. Church is something that I look forward to most in the week. But I know that it means never booking anything else for the following Monday and probably Tuesday because those will be recovery days. For years, we've had to drive to another city to get to church, so I generally blamed that long drive for at least part of the fatigue. But more recently, we did try a nearby church, and I was just as exhausted the next day. So I've had to admit that just the emotional stimulation, along with the noise and stress and other things that can come up of being at church, is a major factor I have to consider when it comes to how it affects my fatigue. I always want to do so much more than my body will let me. It's the same when I go for a nice leisurely walk with my best friend. It's a wonderful time of fellowship and a very light amount of exercise. But again, I'm often surprised how I'm so exhausted the next day that I can't do even a little bit of a workout. I'm just not up for it. A light workout, working some muscles and a bit of stretching, is hugely helpful for my joints and general pain levels. But often, I just can't do even that, and it's frustrating. Doctors and other medical professionals will often talk about how we should be getting half hour at least of a good workout every day in, preferably with a cardio component. I would love to be able to do that one day. But for now, and for the foreseeable future, that's not an option for me. It's hard to help even them to understand why we can't do it. With chronic fatigue, that has been a struggle for many years for me. But now also with seizures and tachycardia that may be POTS, it's even more complicated. There are so many triggers to be aware of, like loud noises, being a little bit overheated even, general overstimulation in social situations, stress, and the list goes on. All things that for most people in the world are just normal parts of life. Any one or more of them can be disastrous for me. I've noticed that I tend to care less about how I look in general as well, because I don't have the energy to really do much about that anymore. But at the same time, it has become a habit for me to check myself in the mirror periodically to make sure I don't look totally ridiculous if I suddenly end up in the hospital again. I know they probably don't care how I look, but I still don't want to look like a bag lady or something, so that has become my primary goal when it comes to vanity these days. So that is my day in a nutshell. There's no shopping, no going to movies or restaurants or on vacations. I'm just home. Or I'm going to get tests done or to a doctor's appointment or being taken to the ER. My husband's day is very different than for other husbands as well. He does most of the cleaning, much of the cooking, all of the shopping, and of course, driving me around to all of my appointments since I am no longer allowed to drive. And frankly, he's afraid to leave me alone much of the time because he's always scared I will have a seizure and fall and hurt myself or something. In fact, every noise I make potentially scares him. It continues to be hard to explain to some family why I cannot travel to visit them anymore. My situation is beyond anything they have ever experienced, so they just don't get it. My husband and I try to explain as best we can. And some do understand and sympathize, but not everyone gets it. And that's just the reality of the situation. Locally, I have a much smaller group of friends than I used to have because I'm so limited in what I can do anymore. Most people that were in my life have just kind of faded away. I understand this is normal for my kind of situation, and there are no hard feelings on my part, to be clear. But yes, life can be lonely and frustrating. It's also not ideal to have to deal with a constant barrage of doctors, many of whom look down at me if I don't blindly follow every single thing they say. As I've mentioned before, I have been injured by the medical system a number of times back when I did blindly follow them without question, and even after that sometimes. So that's not how I do things anymore. Do I take medications? Yes, sometimes, but not always. I ultimately have the full-time job of being my own advocate. I'm the only one who knows all of my symptoms and sensitivities and weird reactions to various things. I may not know how to describe them all in the proper scientific medical terms, but I'm the only one with all of that information. And doctors don't work together as teams the way that we really need them to. So that's a heavy load to carry for me, trying to keep everyone in line so that I'm getting the best help available. That's my world. You can see why I don't have exciting social media accounts full of fun pictures of all my adventures, right? And as I say that, don't get me wrong, I love that my friends do post all that stuff because I kind of like to live vicariously through them sometimes, and I'm happy for them when I get to see that they are doing really fun, wonderful, exciting things. That's how it should be, right? It's just not how it is for me, at least not right now. I don't know if it ever will be. It hasn't been for a long time. So we just keep moving forward and trying to find answers as we go. Try to do research as possible, which is it's hard with, seizure brain and MS fatigue and all of that. Makes it difficult. Not to mention that I don't have any scientific training, so it's really a challenge. And then there's, of course, the issue of all of the weird spiritual things that are kind of woven into some of the alternative therapies, and that really frustrates me because that just takes away from the actual real decent alternative therapies that are out there. So I have to wade through that as well. So it's a lot to deal with, and that's the work that I do, I guess you could say. That's my job. That and occasionally making videos and trying to connect with people as best I can, trying to witness to people as best I can. But I'm here because the Lord put me here, and He has a purpose. And so, although I don't understand any of it, I don't know where we're going, what's going to happen, whether it's going to get better or worse, or a mix of both, but I do trust the Lord because He is faithful and loving, and I am His child, and He is sovereign over all of creation and all of history. And so I trust that He will use all of these things for His glory and for my good. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless.